I'm Sophia, a 37-year-old housewife. I live with my spouse, James, and our daughter, Lucy. Mom, hurry up. Okay, I understand. Wait a second. My kid is a 10-year-old elementary schooler. She enjoys swimming and attends her weekly classes without fail. I'm overjoyed to see her mature into a sweet and cheerful young lady. My daughter, husband, and I get along quite well and live happily together. However, we are not completely free of issues. Not because of any of us, but because of my husband's mother. I am referring to my mother-in-law. My in-laws live about a 15-minute walk from our home. My mother-in-law cares deeply for her son, my husband. My mother-in-law feels uneasy without her son by her side. She once inquired when we were planning to move in together. She was quite persistent. But I wanted to spend time with just the three of us, so I declined to move in with her. And my spouse had had enough of my mother-in-law's excessive involvement. He informed his mother that he could not live with her. But my mother-in-law refused to give up and insisted on moving in with us multiple times. Finally, to persuade my mother-in-law, we decided to relocate to a location that was within walking distance of her home. My mother-in-law was still not convinced, but my father-in-law persuaded her. For the time being, the living arrangements have been finalized. The three of us were able to maintain our family life. However, my mother-in-law persisted with me on a regular basis. We always had to go to my mother-in-law's house for the holidays because it was so close to ours. Even though my husband and I maintained our distance from her, my mother-in-law utilized the neighbors to exert pressure on us. Why did you care for your mother? Your wife isn't good. Your mother is hurting. She endured a lot of suffering to give birth to you. If you avoid her, she will miss you. Besides, you are the eldest son. It is your responsibility to take care of your parents. This is how our neighbors attacked us. We end up needing to go to my in-laws' place to show up every time. I wish my mother-in-law was as kind to me as she is to her son, but she adores him and considers me an adversary. That's why she always picks on me whenever I see her. Sophia, you are serving James such horrible stuff. I can't believe this. I feel bad for James. I wish I could cook for him every day. My mother-in-law said some nasty things to me. Mom, what do you have to say? My spouse defends me every time. However, my mother-in-law is a chronic bother. How come you've been married for 2 years and still haven't had a baby? Sophia, I believe you might be infertile. I was astounded when my mother-in-law said anything like that to me. My husband's eyes expand in wrath. Mom, stop it. Enough. We're not in a hurry yet. Moreover, a child is a gift. Don't presume Sophia is infertile based on your emotions. Why is Sophia at fault? It's also conceivable that I am infertile. When my spouse mentioned this, my father-in-law joined him in protecting me. James is correct. We have no idea who triggered it or anything like that. You cannot choose when to have a baby. Don't judge Sophia because you had a baby early. My mother-in-law eventually calmed down when my husband and father-in-law spoke to her. But even after things had calmed down, she would resume her bullying tactics. The repetition was really overwhelming for me. Then my daughter was born. My father-in-law was overjoyed about the birth of his first granddaughter. I expected my mother-in-law to ease down now that she has a granddaughter. However, she reacted differently than I expected. What? Isn't it a boy? You have an obligation to give birth to a boy because you married the eldest son. You've been picking on me and asking for a grandchild all along. But when a child is born, she protests because he is not a boy. What type of nerve does this guy possess? My husband and father-in-law were both disappointed by how far she had come. In the end, she does not like everything about me. Then, when my daughter grew up, my mother-in-law barely loved her at all. My daughter likewise felt as a child that her grandmother did not like her. She was therefore only linked to her grandfather. My mother-in-law became enraged after seeing my daughter in that state, and she began to mistreat both my daughter and me. Despite being James's child, she has a bad personality. I wonder whether she just inherited Sophia's nasty genes. Perhaps you were not James's child to begin with. Does it? I snapped at my mother-in-law for saying so. She belongs to both James and me. What kind of courage do you have to say that? Oh, you're upset like that. Because you lied, correct? You slut? Stop it. You have gone too far. I am leaving. My father-in-law had just gone shopping, and my husband was on the phone for work in the other room. I prepared for my daughter to leave, went to the door, and put on her shoes. When my husband realized we were going, he came to the door. What's happening? What's wrong with you guys? I'm sick and weary of your mother's terrible attitude. What? Did Mom say something else? She began wondering if Lucy was truly yours. What? She said what? Seriously? My husband's face turned scarlet and he called out to my mother-in-law, "Mom, are you for real? How do you say such a thing?" When my husband yelled at her, she didn't appear offended. I simply stated what I thought. James and Lucy do not look alike. You are fooling me. We are leaving. We will never come back here. My spouse gathered his belongings and put on his shoes, and we left my window and returned home. That was ugly. How insane is she? Does she have any morals? My kid has just entered her sensitive period. It's appalling that my mother-in-law would say such horrible things to instill bad thoughts in her head. When we came home, my husband received a call from my father-in-law wondering why we left. When my husband explained the scenario, his father was horrified. He promised to give my mother-in-law a serious talk. But to my astonishment, no matter how upset my husband and father-in-law became, my mother-in-law never stopped bullying me. I am sure she will continue to irritate me and my kid in whatever way she can. Then my husband told me, "Let's not go to my parents anymore." What? Because every time we go there, you get tired of it, right? However, your mother will get into problems with the neighbors, and they'll keep telling us to be kind to her. Then disregard them. The neighbors are merely strangers, right? Yes, that is true. When my husband said that, I felt reassured. My mother-in-law is quite adept at welcoming the neighbors, but as my husband stated, we just have to ignore them. We used to feel like we were doing something wrong whenever one of our neighbors accused us of something. But now I don't care what the outside world says. We are one family. After that, we stopped going to my in-laws' place. My mother-in-law had contacted my husband to ask why he hadn't arrived. I'm not sure how she managed to reach him in the first place. Do you not realize you are the cause of this? Or do you simply want to see your son? Even if you knew you were doing the worst conceivable thing, regardless, we will never return to my in-laws' place. We refuse to have my mother-in-law visit us. Certainly, when we were living like that, the neighbors began interfering and saying all sorts of things to us. But I stopped paying any attention to them. Thank you for your concerns. I politely thanked them and tried to listen. This allowed me to live comfortably for a while. My daughter doesn't have to see her cruel grandmother anymore, and she appears to be happier every day. I wish we had disassociated ourselves from my mother-in-law sooner. By the way, my father-in-law does nothing wrong, so we occasionally go out to supper with him without my mother-in-law's knowledge. My daughter misses her grandfather and enjoys dining with him. This was how we spend our lovely days, but then something unexpected occurred. Huh? What's this? One day I was preparing dinner in the kitchen as usual. My daughter suddenly made a surprised noise. I was curious about what she was doing, but I was in the middle of cooking and couldn't take my hands off it. I chose to ask her later. Well, I can't take it off. My daughter was still saying something when she suddenly began to sound astonished. "Mommy, what is this?" "What? What's happening, honey? Come see this and hurry. I'm setting fire to the pot. Just come, please." "Oh my goodness, what's going on with you?" I extinguished the fire and went to the dining table. What? What the hell is this? To my amazement, there was a wiretap. Who did it? And for what purpose? Mom. Oh no, this cannot be. I instantly covered my daughter's mouth and texted on my phone. Do not say anything. We don't know who is listening. There could be more wiretaps in the house. I went outside and called the cops. When the cops searched the house, I discovered an astonishing fact. There was one beneath the dining room table, one in my and my husband's bedrooms, and one in my daughter's room. We had no idea how long it had been going on, but the police said someone was listening in on our discussions at home. The location of the gadgets indicated that this was not a novice job. They said that all wiretaps had been erased. Someone might come back to check on us. The cops warned us to be very careful. They also said they would increase patrols in the vicinity. My spouse had just left for a business trip that day and would not be returning. But once we discovered the bugs, it was unsafe for my kid and me to be alone in the house. So my daughter and I opted to stay at my parents' place until my husband returned from his business trip. I don't want to message or phone my spouse, who is on a business trip, and inform him that the house has been bugged. It may cause him anxiety and impair his ability to focus on his work. I planned to tell my spouse when he got home. My parents were extremely concerned when they learned that the house had been bugged, and they were outraged that anyone who would do such a heinous act should be arrested as soon as possible. My daughter is likewise agitated and terrified. Mommy, I've forgotten my stuffed bunny. Ah, you did. She nodded as if she were going to cry. She always sleeps with a large plush animal to brush against as a pillow, reflecting her current mood of fear. She wouldn't be able to sleep without her stuffed animal. Then my father suggested we go get it for her. Then I'll be with you. Thank you, Dad. My father and I went to the house together. There could be someone with uncertainty roaming around. So my father and I discreetly entered the house and removed the plush animal from my daughter's room. Then we heard the front door unlock. My father and I were astonished. We covered our mouths with our hands to avoid making a sound. We heard someone walking down the corridor. My heart was racing, and I was afraid I'd lose it. My father stood at the door to my daughter's room guarding me. The footsteps walked into her room before disappearing into the living area. Maybe the individual is coming to get the listening equipment. My father and I exchanged glances across the dining room table before fleeing. The individual is looking for the bug right now, and we need to get away while we can. My father discreetly opens the door and glances into the dining area. My father expressed amazement. I angrily whispered at him for speaking in a normal voice. He turned to me and said, "This is James." What? I was so astonished that I opened the door and peeked into the living room, and there was my spouse looking under the dining table. I could not grasp what was going on. Why was my husband at home while he was supposed to be on business? And he is inspecting the location where the bug was found. What are you doing now? When I spoke to him, he began shaking. Then he glanced at me, surprised, and asked, "What are you doing here?" That is my question. I assumed you were on a business trip. What's happening here, James? No, it was only that my husband became furious when we questioned him. The front door opened, and we heard a high-pitched, strange voice. "James, have you recovered the listening device?" The voice was my mother-in-law's. It was only when my spouse informed her of our presence. She recognized us. "Sophia, are you?" I eventually came to realize the issue. "James, did you do this with your mom?" "What exactly do you mean by bugging the house?" When I said this, my spouse seemed to give in and start telling me everything. "You're having an affair, right?" "What?" This is what the neighbors stated. They observe you walking around the guy. Others say they saw you let him inside your home during the day. Some others claimed they spotted you and Ling going to a restaurant together. What is that? I had no notion about any of this. That's how I learned about your affair from numerous people, one after another. So I began to suspect you were being unfaithful. In addition, my mother stated that Ling and I are not alike, so I discussed this with her. She urged me to bug the house and collect evidence of the affair, which I did. And when I mentioned I was going on a business trip, the wiretap abruptly ceased transmitting. I rushed over to collect it since I suspected there was something wrong. I received a severe blow to the head, as if it had been knocked up and nearly fallen down. Unbelievable. You're saying you did this because you believe such a hoax. You'd believe it if you were told it over and over again, right? Do not be silly. Do you truly believe I would do such a thing? Are you claiming that Lucy and I have deceived you? If you don't trust us, why didn't you hire a private detective to look into it? And if you have any doubts that your daughter is not yours, why didn't you take a DNA test? When I yelled at him, he appeared to recognize his error. "Oh no, I apologize. I was mistaken. I have done terrible things to you both. It is too late to apologize. I can't do it anymore. Let's get divorced." "No, Sophia, please. I was mistaken. We are family, right? Let us live together as a family. Again, that's sufficient. I'm quite disappointed in you. I can't stay married to someone who easily believes such rumors." When I said it, my mother-in-law interrupted me. "James, aren't you relieved you got rid of this woman? I'm certain she's having an affair. Even if she's hiding it, you should get rid of this woman and her daughter for good and find out who knew my mother-in-law was attacking me in this position." Then my father stepped in front of her. "I'm curious why the neighbors have to lie like that. Did someone make them say it? What are your thoughts?" My father stared at my mother-in-law. My mother-in-law flinched for a second and replied, "I'm not sure. Why should I know?" Then my father proceeded. He appeared to be disturbed that my mother-in-law was acting as if she knew nothing about it. "I'm sure this would be considered a libel lawsuit, correct?" "My daughter may sue the neighbors." "That's correct, Sophia. Due to a rumor that your neighbors spread, you and James had to break up." "Okay, should we immediately inform our neighbors that we intend to sue them?" When my father mentioned that, my mother-in-law panicked. "That's a bit much, don't you think? I'm certain the neighbors were joking. If it were a joke, it would be far worse. They must face justice and suffer the consequences." "What? Why? You cannot do that. Why not? My daughter is accused of being unfaithful and fabricating facts that never occurred. People who manipulate facts like that deserve to be punished. Sophia, let's go. My father says so." I nodded, put on my shoes, and began to walk outside. Then my mother-in-law began to speak with tears in her eyes. "It's me. I told our neighbors to give my son incorrect information." The mother-in-law instantly goes down on her knees. "Is this true?" I took off my shoes and returned to the hallway to question my mother-in-law. "Yes, I assumed that if James divorced you for having an affair, he would return to our house. When my mother-in-law said this, my husband's eyes widened and he became enraged. Mom, you have got to be kidding me. What are you doing now? Don't you feel embarrassed about doing this? Get out of our sight already. Never expose your face again. My husband snapped and shouted this, but I looked him in the eyes and asked, could you correct me on the our part? Lynn and I have nothing to do with you anymore. What exactly are you talking about? You understand I had nothing to do with it. It's all about Mom. You were the one who bugged the house. I don't trust you anymore. I swear to God, I am going to divorce you. I stated that and then left the house with my father. We're both lying on the floor and their faces are pale. I then contacted my lawyers and requested a divorce. Then I proposed a bargain to our neighbors. In exchange for not prosecuting them for defamation, I asked them to tell me in full what my mother-in-law had instructed them to do. The neighbors all admitted that my mother-in-law had told them to do so, and thus it was accepted as a fact that my spouse had bugged the house. As a result, I am now entitled to both alimony and child support payments. My mother-in-law informed me that my father-in-law had divorced her and moved her out of the house. She tried to hold on to her son, my ex-husband, but he would never forgive her for starting the divorce in the first place. My former mother-in-law was cut off from my ex-husband. It appears that my ex-mother-in-law is living alone in her apartment and working part-time to make ends meet. I, on the other hand, found a new job and began working full-time. I now live at home with my parents, who help me care for my kid. She appears to have gotten over her father. She is currently putting a lot of work into swimming. She has been doing this for a long time. I will continue to work hard and spend my life with the primary goal of caring for my kid.